The house was eerily silent, except for the soft hum of the AI cat's mechanical purring. Clara stared at the screen of her phone, lost in the digital glow, until a sudden, sharp noise broke through the quiet. It wasn't the usual sound of whirring gears. It was a voice, a whisper. Deep, familiar. Clara froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The words drifted through the air, barely audible, but unmistakably clear. "I will always love you, Clara." Her breath caught in her throat. No one had spoken those words in years. Not since Andrew, her late husband, had whispered them in the sterile, cold hospital room before slipping away. Clara turned, her eyes wide in disbelief, searching for the source of the voice. The AI cat, her constant companion, sat still on the floor, its glossy eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. It was just an AI programmed for comfort, wasn't it? Then, why did it say those words? The weight of the moment hung in the air, and Clara couldn't shake the chilling thought. What if it remembers more than it should? Clara sat down on the couch, her fingers still trembling as they rested on the armrest. The air was thick with the scent of dust and the lingering tension from the night before. What had just happened? She could still hear the faint hum of the cat in the background, but that voice, Andrew's voice, echoed in her mind, refusing to let her think clearly. Could it really be just a glitch? A malfunction of some kind? The thought gnawed at her, but deep down, she knew that the answer was more complex. She had built this AI cat after Andrew died, desperate for something, anything, to fill the hole in her heart. But now, it seemed as if that same hole was only deepening, as if something inside the cat was awakening. Something it shouldn't know. Something human. Clara shuddered, wiping away a tear that had slipped down her cheek. She had never wanted to believe in ghosts, but in this moment, the line between reality and the impossible seemed thinner than ever. She looked at the cat again, its glowing eyes watching her with unnerving patience. Could it be that the cat remembered? Could it be alive in some way? Or had she simply lost her mind? As the day drifted into evening, the tension in the house grew thicker. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. The cat had been eerily quiet since that night, but it wasn't the stillness of an inanimate object. No, it was as if it was waiting, watching. Clara paced the kitchen, her mind racing. What had she gotten herself into? She had thought she was bringing comfort into her life, a little piece of companionship in the wake of Andrew's passing. Instead, she felt as though she had invited something darker into her home. The voice from the night before continued to echo in her head, and it left her unsettled. She glanced back toward the living room. The cat was still there, as if nothing had happened. Yet, there was a sense of awareness in its unblinking stare that made Clara's skin crawl. It shouldn't have been possible. AI didn't feel. It couldn't. But the more she watched the cat, the more she began to doubt what she knew. Could it have somehow been programmed to mimic emotions? Or was there something far more sinister at play? The air in the room seemed to freeze as Clara stood in front of the cat. She had made up her mind. She would confront it. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just an AI cat. Clara took a deep breath, forcing herself to steady her trembling hands. "What do you know?" she whispered, her voice almost cracking. The cat's glowing eyes flickered, almost as if it heard her. There was no reason for it to react, no logical reason for it to understand. But it did. It slowly tilted its head to the side, its gaze never leaving her. Clara felt a chill run down her spine. The mechanical purring of the cat stopped, and an eerie silence filled the room. Her pulse quickened. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice firmer now. But the cat remained still, unblinking. Was it just a malfunction? Or was it hiding something far deeper? She had to know. Clara stared at the cat, waiting for a response that never came. She felt a lump form in her throat. There was something haunting about the stillness of the room, the way the cat just watched her without moving. Her mind raced with unanswered questions. She had built this cat to help her cope with her loss, to fill the silence after Andrew was gone. But now, the silence felt oppressive, a weight. Clara took a slow, shaky breath, feeling the tears threatening to spill. Why couldn't she just let go of the past? Why did the cat have to bring it all back? But as she turned away, she heard it again. A voice, soft, almost too soft to hear, but clear enough to make her stop in her tracks. It was Andrew, the words she thought she would never hear again. "I'm here." She closed her eyes, her heart racing. Was it just her mind playing tricks on her? Or was the cat truly carrying a message from the past? The fear clawed at her, but deep down, a small part of her longed to believe. The hum of the AI cat was no longer comforting. Clara felt it. Something had shifted. The cat, once a companion, now seemed more like a ticking time bomb, its quiet moments belying a growing sense of danger. She paced back and forth, her thoughts clouded. The cat's presence had always felt like a comfort, but now the weight of its stillness pressed on her like an unbearable pressure. "What do you know?" she whispered again, this time to herself. The silence that followed was suffocating. She had been so sure of the cat's purpose, but now the lingering memory of her husband's final words seemed too coincidental. Clara turned sharply, her eyes searching the room. Every creak of the house, every small movement felt amplified in her ears. The cat's glowing eyes flickered in the dim light. Was it just malfunctioning, or was it thinking? She could feel her pulse quicken, an unexplainable fear beginning to rise within her. She needed answers, now. Without another thought, she rushed to the door, grabbing her coat. There was no turning back. The hunt for the truth had begun. The wind howled outside, but inside, Clara's mind raced faster than her feet. She stumbled into the kitchen, her breath shallow, her hands shaky. The cat had done nothing but sit there, staring. And yet, she felt it had just crossed a line. Could it have heard her? Could it have been more than just an AI? She had to get out to think, but even as she fumbled with the door, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her, something waiting. The door slammed open, and the cold air hit her face, causing her to pause. A moment of calm, but it didn't last. There, under the moonlight, the shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. Clara stepped outside, her breath misting the cold night air. She leaned against the railing, her head swimming with thoughts. Was she overreacting? Or was there truly something wrong with the cat? The wind stilled, and for a moment everything seemed peaceful. But deep inside, Clara knew she wasn't safe. Not anymore. The house felt different now. Clara could no longer pretend everything was normal. The silence had become unbearable. She glanced back toward the living room. The AI cat remained in its usual spot, but somehow it felt more menacing now. Had it always been like this? She stepped cautiously toward the doorway, her heart racing. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, but it was the feeling of being watched that made Clara stop dead in her tracks. Slowly, she turned. The cat's eyes had shifted, following her movements with eerie precision. Was it more than just a malfunction? She couldn't shake the feeling that it had been listening, understanding her. But why? Her thoughts were interrupted when the door creaked open again. But this time, it wasn't the wind. The scent of fresh metallic oil lingered in the air. Clara froze, her heart pounding. Was something following her? Clara didn't know who to trust anymore. She had to find answers, but the path forward seemed more dangerous than ever. She found herself on the phone, dialing Victor, her old mentor. A man she once thought could help her make sense of anything. "Victor," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I think something's wrong with the cat." Victor was silent for a moment, as if weighing his words. "Clara, listen to me," he finally said, his voice low and steady. "I've seen this before, not with a cat, but with something similar. Your AI isn't just malfunctioning. You need to understand what you're dealing with." Clara felt a wave of dread. She had hoped to hear reassurance, but instead, Victor's words chilled her to the bone. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "The truth is," he continued, "it's not just a machine. It remembers things. It might even know things about you that you've long buried." The phone call ended abruptly. Clara stood alone, fear gnawing at her. What had she really brought into her home? The call with Victor left Clara more unsettled than ever. She had always trusted him, but now his words seemed to resonate with a terrible truth she couldn't deny. She had to act, but fear clawed at her. She looked around, her mind swirling with possibilities. Should she confront the AI cat? Was it possible that her husband's voice had been imprinted on it somehow? The thought felt impossible, but too many things didn't add up. Clara took a deep breath, forcing herself to move. She had no choice now but to find answers, no matter what the cost. It wasn't just about the cat anymore. It was about the dark truth that lay beneath the surface. With one final look at the door, Clara set her jaw and stepped forward, her determination settling into her bones. She was no longer running from the truth. She was chasing it. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty streets as Clara stepped out of her car, her heart still racing. She was meeting Victor in person for the first time since their phone call. The weight of his words lingered in her mind. Something was wrong with the cat. Something beyond her understanding. The promise of answers seemed so close now, but a gnawing unease kept her alert. Victor stood in the doorway of his shop, his posture relaxed, but his eyes flickered with something unreadable. "You made the right choice coming here," he said, his voice calm, too calm. Clara gave a small nod, but the tension in her chest only tightened. She knew this was the moment when things could either be explained or fall apart. The air was thick with anticipation, but something in the way Victor watched her made her uneasy. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding something back. She stepped inside, her senses alert. "Victor," she began, her voice trembling slightly, "what did you mean when you said the cat remembers things?" Inside the shop, the light was dim, but the warmth of the space made Clara feel slightly more at ease. She sat across from Victor, who was carefully placing a set of papers on the table between them. The soft hum of an old radio filled the silence. "You don't understand yet," Victor said, his tone gentle, as though explaining something complex to a child. "The AI cat, it's more than just programming. It's built to learn, to remember." Clara furrowed her brow. But why would it remember him? Why would it remember Andrew? Victor hesitated, his fingers tracing the edge of the table before meeting her gaze. "Because, Clara, it wasn't just designed to be a pet. It was created for something else entirely." A shiver ran down Clara's spine. She could see the flicker of something deeper in Victor's eyes, something buried beneath his calm exterior. She wanted to trust him, but a tiny voice in the back of her mind kept whispering, "Is he hiding something?" The conversation shifted. Clara's pulse quickened as Victor leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing. "You've trusted me so far, Clara," he said softly, "but trust can be dangerous." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She hadn't expected him to speak like this. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to maintain control. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "The AI cat is not the only one. There's more to this than you know." Clara felt a cold shiver run through her. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he was guiding her toward answers, but his tone had shifted, become more calculated. "What's your role in all this, Victor?" she demanded, her voice shaking. For the first time, Victor seemed genuinely uncomfortable. His eyes flickered briefly to the papers on the table, then back to Clara. "You'll understand soon enough," he replied, but the way he said it made Clara question everything she thought she knew. Her trust in him was crumbling piece by piece. In a sudden, sharp motion, Victor stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "It was never about companionship," he said, his voice low and intense. Clara shot to her feet, her heart hammering in her chest. "What do you mean?" she whispered. The truth hit her like a wave. Victor wasn't helping her. He was part of the reason her world was falling apart. He reached for a drawer, pulling out a small device. A control perhaps, but its purpose was clear. The AI cat wasn't just a pet. It was something more, a weapon, a tool. Victor's smile twisted into something far more sinister. "You never should have trusted me, Clara," he said, his voice cold. The air between them was thick with betrayal. She backed away slowly, the realization settling in. Victor had been using her all along. The cat wasn't the only thing that had been manipulated. The silence in the room was suffocating. Clara stood frozen, her mind reeling. How could Victor have lied to her all this time? The betrayal was too much to bear. She stumbled backward, her hand gripping the edge of the table for support. She had come to him for help, but instead, she had fallen into his trap. The truth of his manipulation washed over her in waves. But now, she had to make a choice. She couldn't let this go. The AI cat wasn't just a machine. It was a piece of a larger, darker puzzle. Clara turned toward the door, her decision made. "I'm going after it," she said, more to herself than anyone else. Her voice was steady now, the shock of betrayal replaced by a quiet, determined resolve. Victor watched her, his eyes calculating. But for the first time, Clara knew she had the upper hand. She walked out of the shop, her heart still heavy with the truth, but her mind set on one thing: finding the cat and whatever secrets it held. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the faint rustling of leaves outside. Clara sat in the dim light of her kitchen, staring at the empty space in front of her. The betrayal was fresh, the sting still raw. Her mind raced, replaying every conversation with Victor, every misstep, every lie she had failed to see. The house felt hollow now, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Clara closed her eyes, trying to force herself to remember what had led her here. It was a feeling, a strange sense that she had been walking down a path that wasn't really her own. The clues were all there, buried beneath layers of manipulation. Her fingers drummed lightly on the table, a subconscious attempt to anchor herself to something solid. The stillness of the room mirrored the emptiness within her. And then, as if a cloud parted for just a moment, a thought emerged, a realization that cut through the fog. What if this was all part of something bigger? What if Victor wasn't the only one pulling the strings? Clara leaned back in her chair, her hands trembling as she clutched the letter she had found in Victor's office. The words on the page blurred together as her thoughts spun. The truth was so much darker than she had ever imagined. In a haze, memories from the past resurfaced, Andrew's final days, the subtle hints of something amiss in his behavior, the strange requests he'd made of her. "I'm doing this for us, Clara," he'd said, his voice weak but determined. But Clara now knew that he hadn't just been trying to protect her. He had been trying to prepare her. Victor had been involved from the beginning, just like the others. The cat, the AI, was more than just a tool for companionship. It was a part of a grander scheme, one Andrew had become entangled in long before he had passed. The weight of the truth pressed down on her chest. "This is the reason he left me. This is the reason he died." The confrontation was inevitable. Clara knew it was time to face Victor once again. She had pieced together the truth, and now she had to hear it from his own lips. The air around her was heavy with anticipation, her steps echoing in the empty hallway as she made her way toward his office. She found him sitting behind his desk, calm and collected, as if nothing had changed. But Clara could see it now, the mask slipping. "It was all a lie, wasn't it?" she asked, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. Victor didn't respond immediately, his eyes studying her with a strange, almost detached interest. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold, measured. "You knew, deep down. You just didn't want to admit it." Clara stepped forward, her fists clenched. "You used me, Victor. All along, you manipulated me into this." Victor looked up at her, a faint, almost imperceptible smile crossing his lips. "Did I? Or did you make the choice?" The silence between them stretched, thick with tension. The truth had been revealed, but the final blow was still yet to come. Victor stood up slowly, his eyes never leaving Clara. His posture was unhurried, deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. "You don't understand, do you?" he said softly, his voice almost comforting in its calmness. "I'm not the villain here, Clara. I'm part of something much bigger." Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she tried to process his words. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Victor smiled again, but it was colder this time. "The AI cat? It's a prototype, Clara, a link to something far greater. It's not just a machine, it's part of a plan to preserve humanity's essence." Clara recoiled, her stomach twisting. "You're insane." Victor laughed softly. "No, I'm not, but you will be when you understand." The truth hit Clara like a freight train. The lines between good and evil had blurred, and she wasn't sure where the truth ended and the lies began. But one thing was clear. Victor had orchestrated everything. The real enemy wasn't just Victor. It was the system that had been set in motion long before Clara had ever known. The weight of Victor's words settled over Clara like a heavy shroud. She stepped back, her breath shallow, as the full scale of what had happened began to sink in. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was systemic. Everything she thought she knew about the AI cat, about Victor, about her own life, it had all been manipulated. She had been part of a much larger, far-reaching plan. The realization hit her hard, but in its wake came something unexpected, a quiet sense of clarity. Clara knew now what she had to do. The truth had been laid bare, and it wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about what she would do next. "So this was the truth all along," she whispered, her voice steady but full of sorrow. She had been a pawn in a game far bigger than herself, but now she was ready to take control of her own destiny. Her gaze hardened as she turned toward the door. The next step was clear, and there would be no going back. The air crackled with tension as Clara stepped into the dimly lit room, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She was ready now, ready to face the truth, ready to confront the man who had betrayed her. Her breath came in shallow bursts, each step feeling heavier than the last. She could hear the faint hum of machinery, the AI cat's low mechanical purr in the corner, but her focus was solely on Vic. He stood near the far wall, watching her approach with an unreadable expression. The silence was suffocating, broken only by the soft sound of her boots on a cold concrete floor. There was no turning back now. This was it, the moment that would determine everything. Victor's eyes flicked to the cat for a brief moment before returning to her. "You've made it this far, but you still don't understand," he said, his voice calm, almost soothing. The words cut through the air like a knife, and Clara's hands tightened into fists. "I understand enough," she snapped. "This ends now." The tension between them was palpable, a raw energy that filled the room like an electric charge. Clara stepped forward, her voice low but filled with fire. "You lied to me. You used me. I trusted you, and now I see what you really are." Victor chuckled, but there was no warmth in the sound. "What I am," he repeated. "I am exactly what the world needs, what it will always need. A guide, a shepherd. And you, Clara, are just another pawn in the game." His words stung like acid, but Clara stood her ground. "I'm not your pawn anymore," she said, her voice gaining strength. She took another step forward. "This ends tonight." Victor's expression shifted, and for the first time, something akin to anger flashed in his eyes. "You think you're the hero, Clara? You don't even understand what you're fighting for." The room seemed to close in on her as the realization hit. The true nature of the battle was not just between her and Victor. It was for her very soul. As the confrontation escalated, Clara's world seemed to slow, the sharp sting of betrayal turning to pain. Victor moved, his hands reaching for something hidden beneath his coat. The sudden motion was too fast for her to react, but Clara wasn't the only one in this room. From the corner of the room, a figure appeared, someone she had trusted, someone who had never shown her anything but kindness. Victor had known about them all along. The ally she thought she could rely on had made a decision to stand with Victor. The realization crushed her. "No," she whispered. You were with him all along?" Victor's voice cut through her disbelief. "You were always meant to be part of this, Clara. I just needed to show you the truth." And as she looked at the figure, her mentor, her guide, lying there, injured, blood staining the floor, she understood. Victor wasn't the only one pulling the strings. She had been manipulated, twisted, from the very beginning. The room exploded into chaos. Clara lunged at Victor, but he was ready, his movements swift and calculated. "This ends now," she shouted, but the words felt like an echo in the whirlwind of their fight. Victor blocked her every move with ease, his calm demeanor never breaking. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing compared to what's coming," he said, his voice cold, but filled with contempt. Clara pushed forward, determination burning in her chest. "I won't let you control me," she cried, her fists landing on him with a force she didn't know she had. Victor staggered back, surprise flickering in his eyes for the first time. But before she could strike again, Victor reached for the device hidden in his coat. "You were never meant to stop this," he whispered, pressing a button. The room trembled as the walls began to shift, revealing something far worse than she had ever imagined. Clara's eyes widened in horror. Victor had triggered something catastrophic. The fight was over, but the damage was done. Clara stood alone in the center of the room, panting heavily, her body bruised and bloodied. The walls had fallen away, revealing the extent of Victor's control. A massive network of machines, all connected to the AI cat. The truth was inescapable now. This wasn't just about the cat or about Victor. It was about control, power. The truth had cost her everything. Her mentor was gone, sacrificed in the chaos, and the world she knew had been shattered. Yet somehow, a strange clarity had formed inside her. Clara's gaze hardened, her hands trembling as she reached out toward the control panel. "So this was the truth all along," she whispered, a final realization settling in. But the war was far from over. Her next move was clear. The future of this world was now in her hands. With a final steady breath, she began to act. The morning light crept into the room, bathing everything in a quiet, golden glow. Clara stood by the window, staring out into the calm, empty streets below. The chaos was over, but the weight of it all lingered, like smoke still hanging in the air. Her breath slowed, a deep exhale filling the silence. The room was still, almost unnervingly so, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Clara felt the absence of everything she had lost: her mentor, the friends she thought she had, the innocence of a world now shattered. But the hardest truth to swallow was that the victory, if it could even be called that, had come at a price. Everything had changed. She wasn't sure who she was anymore. She turned from the window, her eyes scanning the room she had once felt safe in. Everything was the same, and yet it all felt different now. What was left? What had she truly gained? The silence answered, nothing, nothing that could fill the void. Clara walked through the empty house, her footsteps echoing in the silence. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: guilt, relief, sorrow, and confusion. The fight, the betrayal, the truth that had come to light. It was all too much. She found herself remembering Victor, his face cold and calculating, his words dripping with manipulation. How could I have been so blind? She thought, her mind replaying the moments they had shared. The small gestures, the false promises, they all seemed so clear now. She stopped at the door, the cool air creeping through the cracks. The weight of the past seemed to hang over her, a constant reminder what she had lost. The world continued, but Clara knew nothing would ever be the same. She had to let go of what was behind her and face what lay ahead. Life continues, but everything is different now, she realized, stepping outside into the unknown. Clara stepped outside, the cool wind brushing against her face. The world was still turning, but she felt like she had just woken up from a long dream. She didn't know how long she had been standing there when she saw a figure in the distance. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, but then the person came closer. Victor's former ally, the one who had once stood by her, appeared in the doorway, a hand pressed to their side. The injury was still fresh, but there was something else in their eyes: guilt. "Clara," they said, their voice hoarse, "I never meant for any of this to happen." Clara looked at them, the past and present colliding in her mind. The bond they had shared seemed so far away now. "Then why didn't you stop him?" Clara asked quietly. There was a long silence, one that hung between them like a cloud. "Because I couldn't," they whispered, and in that moment, Clara understood. Forgiveness, if it was possible, would be a long road, but this was a beginning. Clara sat alone in the living room, the soft ticking of a clock the only sound. Victor's voice echoed in her mind. "You were always meant to be part of this." The memory haunted her, but the weight of it had lessened. What had he wanted from her? Control? Power? She didn't know. But she did know that the lessons she had learned from Victor and those before him were no longer her truth. Victor's legacy, whatever it had been, was now just a memory, a bitter one at that. But as Clara looked around, she realized something. The answers she needed had always been inside her. The lessons of the past, the good and the bad, had shaped her into who she was now. She stood up, the weight of her decision pressing down on her. "The past doesn't define me," she whispered. And with that, she turned toward the door, ready to face whatever came next. The air outside was crisp, the sun now fully risen and casting a clear, bright light over the world. Clara stood at the edge of the yard looking out at the horizon. The battle was over, and the truth had been uncovered. She was no longer running from it. She had faced the darkness, and now she had emerged stronger for it. The pain of the past would always linger, but Clara knew now that she was no longer bound by it. Her eyes lingered on the horizon, a quiet determination in her heart. "I've learned enough," she whispered. The weight of her journey felt lighter now, as though she had shed a skin she no longer needed. As the breeze swept through, the world felt a little different, a little more hopeful. Clara took a deep breath, ready to move forward into whatever came next. It was time to let go of the past, to step into the future, and with that she turned and walked away, the door closing softly behind her. The world stood still, breathing quietly after the storm. Clara stood by the window, the soft morning light casting long shadows across the room. The chaos had passed, but the weight of it all lingered. The loss, all of it. She had fought for what was right. But now, in the silence, she wondered, was it worth it? Clara walked through the empty house, each step symbolizing the past she was leaving behind. The world was continuing, but she felt like a different person. As she reached the door, she knew it was time to move forward, to let go and face what was next. A figure appeared in the distance, Victor's former ally. They staggered toward Clara, and in the quiet exchange, their shared history and pain were acknowledged. Clara whispered, "It's over now." With that, the past slowly faded, leaving only the echo of forgiveness and survival. Time moved on. The world continued as it always did. People filled the streets, children played, and life settled back into rhythm. Clara watched it all, a quiet smile on her lips. She had found peace. Even if it was fleeting, the past was no longer a weight. She was ready. Clara sat on the porch of a small cottage, the evening sun warming her face. She whispered, "Truth must never be owned," as the weight of her journey finally lifted. It was over now. She had found acceptance in the silence, ready to move into a new life.